The great council hall on Kepler Station was filled with fear and desperation. Representatives from over 50 different alien species sat in their special chairs and floating pods. The air was thick with worry as translators worked overtime to help everyone understand each other. In the center of the massive room stood Ambassador Kethvar from the Zephyrian Union. His blue skin was flickering with patterns that meant he was very upset. "Friends and allies," Kethvar began, his voice shaking through the universal translator. "We are facing the worst crisis in galactic history. The Vrak Empire has been destroying everything in their path for 3 standard years now. Yesterday they finished taking over the Meridian sector. 14 billion lives were lost." A heavy silence fell over the room. The insect-like Chithari clicked their sharp jaws together nervously. The crystal beings called resonance made sad musical sounds. Even the proud warrior race of Gornathi looked defeated. Everyone had tried to fight the Vrak Empire and everyone had failed. The Vrak were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever seen. Their ships were not made of metal and circuits like normal spacecraft. Instead, they were grown like living creatures. These bioships could heal themselves when damaged and change their armor to resist different types of weapons. When the Zephyrians attacked with plasma cannons, the Vrak ships just absorbed the energy and used it to make themselves stronger. When the Gornathi used their powerful phase weapons, the Vrak armor adapted and became immune to them. "How many ships have we lost trying to stop them?" asked General Thrak of the Gornathi military. His reptilian face showed the scars of many battles. "Over 12,000 vessels from all our combined fleets," answered Counselor Veltar. The snake-like alien coiled her long body around her speaking platform. "Every time we think we have found a weakness in their defenses, they adapt and become stronger. Their bioacid weapons dissolve our strongest armor in seconds. Our best shields cannot stop their attacks." The room erupted in worried voices speaking in dozens of different languages. Some species wanted to evacuate their homeworlds and run to the outer rim of the galaxy. Others suggested trying to negotiate with the Vrak, even though they had never shown any interest in peace talks. A few still believed they could build bigger weapons and try again, but most knew that was hopeless. "Order! We need order!" shouted the session leader as he banged his staff against the floor. Slowly the voices died down and everyone looked toward the center of the room again. Veltar raised herself higher on her platform and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried to every corner of the hall. "There is one option we have not yet tried. One species that has not joined the fight against the Vrak." "Who?" demanded General Thrak. "Every major power in the galaxy has thrown everything they have at these monsters. The Crystalline Imperium lost half their fleet in one battle. The Hive Collective sacrificed 3 entire colony worlds trying to slow them down. Who is left?" "The humans of Sol 3, Veltar replied. The reaction was immediate and loud. Some aliens laughed while others made dismissive sounds in their own languages. The humans were known throughout the galaxy but not as warriors. They were a young species that had only been traveling between stars for about 500 years. Most galactic powers had been spacefaring for thousands of years. Human technology seemed primitive compared to what other species had developed. Their ships were small and made of basic metals instead of the advanced materials most civilizations used. Instead of energy weapons like plasma cannons or quantum disruptors, humans still used kinetic weapons that shot solid projectiles. It was like bringing rocks to a fight where everyone else had laser swords. "You want us to ask children to save us?" General Thrak hissed angrily. The entire human fleet would not be enough to fight even one Vrak dreadnought. They barely have 50 warships in their whole navy. "But they have remained neutral in this conflict," Veltar pointed out. "They have been watching and learning while we have been dying. Maybe they have seen something we missed." "What could they possibly know that we do not?" asked Ambassador Kethvar. "We have the combined knowledge and technology of dozens of advanced civilizations. The humans are still figuring out how to build proper energy shields." The debate continued for hours. Some thought asking for human help was a sign of how desperate they had become. Others worried that even if the humans agreed to help, they would just be sending more innocent beings to die against the unstoppable Vrak war machine. But as reports continued to arrive of more systems falling to the Vrak advance, everyone began to realize they were running out of options. "The Vrak fleet is moving toward the core worlds," announced a communications officer who had just received an urgent message. "Intelligence suggests they will reach the Altair system within 10 standard days. After that, there will be nothing stopping them from attacking the homeworlds of our major species." The room fell completely silent. Everyone understood what this meant. If the core systems fell, the galactic civilization they had all worked together to build would be destroyed. Billions more would die, and the survivors would be scattered to the farthest edges of known space. "I call for a vote," said the session leader, all in favor of requesting military assistance from Earth. Slowly, hands and tentacles and claws rose around the room. Even General Thrak finally raised his scaled hand, though he did not look happy about it. The vote was not unanimous, but it was clear enough. "The motion passes," announced the session leader. "We will send an emergency transmission to Earth requesting their help. We will offer them full membership in the Galactic Council and access to our most advanced technologies in exchange for whatever military support they can provide." The message was sent immediately using the fastest quantum communication systems available. It included detailed information about the Vrak threat and battle records from all previous engagements. The council members waited anxiously for a response, knowing that even if the humans agreed to help, it might already be too late. The reply came back in less than 6 hours, which was incredibly fast for such an important decision. Most species would have debated for days or weeks before committing their forces to such a dangerous mission. The message was short and simple. "Admiral Jake Morrison, commanding 3rd Terran Defense Fleet, departing Earth now. Estimated arrival at Kepler Station in 72 hours. Will assess situation upon arrival and proceed accordingly." When the translation was complete, many of the alien representatives looked at each other with confusion. They had expected either a detailed list of questions about the threat or a long explanation of what Earth would need to participate in the fight. Instead, they got a brief military report that sounded like the humans had already made up their minds before the message even arrived. "That is all?" asked Kethvar. "No questions about our technology? No requests for additional information about Vrak capabilities? No demands for payment or territory?" "Apparently not," replied Veltar thoughtfully. "Perhaps the humans are more confident than we expected, or perhaps they simply do not understand what they are agreeing to face." Either way, the die was cast. In 3 days, the human fleet would arrive, and they would all learn whether this desperate gamble would save the galaxy, or just provide the Vrak with a few more ships to destroy on their path to total conquest. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship USS Defender and watched the massive Kepler station grow larger on the main screen. The space station was enormous compared to anything humans had built. It stretched for dozens of kilometers in all directions, with docking bays that could hold ships the size of small cities. Lights from thousands of windows sparkled like stars across its surface. Morrison was a man in his early 50s with gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of command. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies and helped establish Earth's first deep space trading routes. But this was different. This was humanity's first real test on the galactic stage, and everyone knew it. "Sir, we are receiving docking instructions from Station Control," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park from her position at the comm station. She was a young woman with short black hair who had graduated at the top of her class from the Naval Academy. "They want us to use docking bays 7 through 15. That should give us enough space for all 50 ships." Morrison nodded and looked at the tactical display showing his fleet. 50 ships was not a large force by galactic standards, but it represented the best Earth had to offer. There were 20 destroyers armed with railguns and missile systems, 15 cruisers with heavier armor and bigger weapons, 10 support vessels carrying supplies and repair equipment, and the pride of the fleet, 5 Titan-class battleships, including his own flagship. The ships were not pretty by alien standards. They were built for function rather than beauty, with thick armor plating and weapon systems that looked crude compared to the sleek energy weapons other species used. But Morrison knew his ships and crews were ready for whatever they might face. "Commander Steve Collins, please join me in my ready room," Morrison ordered. Collins was his second in command, a tall man with sandy brown hair and a serious expression who had served with Morrison for over 10 years. "And ask Lieutenant Amy Chen to bring her analysis of the enemy threat data." In his private office, Morrison spread out the intelligence reports the aliens had sent. The data was extensive, but what caught his attention were the patterns of how the Vrak ships fought. They were indeed biological creatures rather than mechanical constructs, but they followed certain rules and behaviors, just like any living thing. "What do you think, Steve?" Morrison asked as Collins reviewed the tactical information. "These Vrak ships are impressive," Collins admitted. "Their ability to adapt and regenerate is unlike anything we have faced before." But sir, they seem to rely heavily on that regeneration ability. Every battle report shows the same pattern. They take damage, then heal themselves while continuing to attack. Lieutenant Amy Chen knocked on the door and entered carrying a thick data pad. She was a brilliant tactical analyst who had spent the entire journey from Earth studying every piece of information about the wrack they could get. Her Asian features were set in concentration as she had clearly been working non-stop. Admiral Y have completed my analysis of the enemy capabilities, Chen reported. Permission to speak freely, sir? Always Amy, what did you find? Chen activated her datapad and projected a holographic display of a wrack bioship. Sir, these vessels are fascinating from a biological standpoint. They are essentially giant organisms that have been engineered for space combat. But like all living things, they have certain weaknesses that can be exploited. Morrison leaned forward with interest. Go on. The regeneration systems require enormous amounts of energy, Chen explained. When they heal battle damage, they have to divert power from other systems. Also, their adaptation ability is reactive, not predictive. They can only adapt to threats they have already encountered. Meaning what exactly? Collins asked. Chen smiled for the first time since they had left Earth. Meaning, sir, that if we hit them with something they have never seen before, they will not be ready for it. And if we can overwhelm their regeneration systems, they will not be able to keep up with the damage. Morrison studied the holographic display showing the internal structure of a wrack ship. He could see the bioneural networks that controlled ship functions and the organic systems that provided power and life support. It was indeed like looking at a giant living creature rather than a spacecraft. What kind of weapons have been used against them so far? Morrison asked. Chen consulted her notes. Plasma cannons, phase disruptors, quantum torpedoes, ion beams, and various forms of energy weapons, all of which can be absorbed or adapted to given enough time. But nobody has tried kinetic weapons, Collins observed. Exactly, sir, Chen agreed. Kinetic weapons are considered primitive by galactic standards. Most species stopped using them thousands of years ago when energy weapons became more efficient. Morrison walked to the window of his ready room and looked out at the alien space station. Hundreds of different species lived and worked there, representing the combined knowledge and technology of an entire galaxy. Yet they had all failed against the wrack using their advanced weapons and tactics. Amy, I want you to run some calculations, Morrison ordered. What would happen if we hit these bioships with tungsten carbide penetrator rounds traveling at 12% light speed? Chen's eyes widened as she began working on her datapad. Sir, at that velocity, the kinetic energy would be equivalent to tactical nuclear weapons. The penetrating power would be enormous, and their regeneration systems would not be able to cope with that level of structural damage, Chen replied excitedly. Sir, you are thinking of using our railguns against them, Morrison nodded.
That is exactly what I am thinking.
But we need to be smart about this. One salvo probably will not be enough to stop an entire fleet. We need to maximize our advantage. Collins was studying the battle reports again. Sir, what if we loaded special ammunition? We have those experimental rounds from the research division. The ones with the biological payloads? Morrison asked. That could work. Hit them with kinetic penetrators to breach their hulls, then follow up with rounds designed to disrupt biological systems. Chen was practically bouncing with excitement now. Admiral, that could be incredibly effective. These creatures have never encountered Earth-based biological agents. They would have no immunity or resistance. Morrison made his decision. Contact the fleet. I want all ships to reconfigure their ammunition loads. Primary rounds will be tungsten carbide penetrators. Secondary rounds will be the biological payload specials from R&D. We are going to give these wracks something they have never seen before. Sir, Collins asked quietly, what if this does not work? What if we are just another failed attack? Morrison looked out at the stars beyond the space station. Somewhere out there, the wrack fleet was advancing toward the core worlds, leaving destruction in their wake. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and humanity had been asked to save them all. Then at least we tried something different, Morrison replied. But Steve, I have a feeling these wrack are about to learn why you should never underestimate a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history fighting biological threats. Earth has been dealing with bacteria, viruses, and parasites for millions of years. We know how to kill living things. The meeting ended and Morrison prepared to meet with the alien delegates. Soon he would have to explain to them how humanity planned to succeed where everyone else had failed. But first he needed to make sure his fleet was ready for what might be the most important battle in galactic history. The diplomatic meeting on Kepler Station was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. In the main conference hall, Ambassador Kethvar sat with representatives from dozens of alien species, all waiting to hear what the humans planned to do. The room was filled with tension as everyone wondered if these newcomers could really succeed, where so many others had failed. Admiral Morrison entered the hall with Commander Collins and Lieutenant Chen following behind him. The alien delegates studied the humans carefully, noting their simple uniforms and confident expressions. Most species expected their military leaders to wear elaborate ceremonial armor or display symbols of their power. The humans looked almost plain by comparison. Admiral Morrison, Kethvar began through his translator device. "We are grateful that Earth has answered our call for help. However, I must warn you about what you are facing. The Vrak Empire has destroyed fleets 10 times larger than yours. Their bioships can adapt to any weapon we use against them." Morrison took his seat at the conference table and activated a holographic display showing the tactical data his people had analyzed during their journey. "Ambassador, with all due respect, we have studied your engagement records extensively. The problem is not that the Vrak are invincible. The problem is that everyone has been fighting them the wrong way." A murmur went through the room as the alien delegates translated this statement for their various species. General Thrak of the Gornathi leaned forward aggressively. "Wrong way? We have used every advanced weapon system known to galactic civilization. What could you possibly know that we do not?" Lieutenant Chen stepped forward and began manipulating the holographic display to show the internal structure of a Vrak bioship. "General, you have been treating their vessels like mechanical constructs built from metal and circuits. But these ships are living creatures. That changes everything about how you should approach combat against them. Like living creatures can still be killed with sufficient firepower," argued a representative from the Crystalline Imperium whose voice sounded like wind chimes. "We have hit them with plasma cannons capable of melting asteroids. They simply absorb the energy and heal themselves." "That is exactly the problem," Morrison replied calmly. "Energy weapons are actually feeding them. Every time you shoot plasma or lasers at these things, you are giving them more power to work with. It is like trying to drown a fish by throwing it in water." Commander Collins activated another part of the display showing battle footage from previous engagements. "Look at this pattern. Every time your ships attack with energy weapons, the Vrak vessels glow brighter, and their regeneration speeds up. You are literally making them stronger while you fight them." Counselor Veltar coiled her serpentine body thoughtfully. "If energy weapons make them stronger, then what do you propose? We cannot fight a space battle with primitive projectile weapons." "Why not?" Morrison asked simply. "Just because something is old does not mean it is ineffective. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones." Chen brought up a new display showing Earth weapons technology. "Our railgun systems can accelerate tungsten carbide projectiles to 12% of light speed. At that velocity, the kinetic energy is equivalent to nuclear weapons but without any energy. Signature for the Vrak to absorb." "Kinetic weapons," scoffed General Thrak. "We stopped using such crude technology thousands of years ago. You might as well be throwing rocks at them." "Sometimes rocks work better than lasers," Morrison replied with a slight smile. "But we are not just planning to throw rocks. These bioships have another weakness that nobody has exploited yet." "What weakness?" asked Kethvar eagerly. "They are biological," Chen answered. "That means they can get sick. Every living thing in the universe is vulnerable to disease and infection. The Vrak have adapted to resist energy weapons and conventional explosives, but they have never encountered Earth-based biological agents." The room fell silent as the implications began to sink in. Morrison continued the explanation. "Our secondary ammunition includes specially designed payloads containing aggressive bacteria viruses and chemical agents specifically engineered to disrupt organic systems. We are not just planning to shoot them. We are planning to give them diseases they have never seen before." A delegate from the insectoid Chithari species clicked his mandibles nervously. "Biological warfare is considered barbaric by most civilized species. It is unpredictable and difficult to control. It is also incredibly effective against organic targets," Collins pointed out. "Humans have been dealing with biological threats for our entire evolutionary history. We know how these systems work and how to exploit their weaknesses." Veltar raised herself higher on her platform. "You speak with great confidence, Admiral, but the Vrak have destroyed entire fleets in minutes. What makes you think 50 human ships can succeed where thousands of our vessels have failed? Morrison stood up and looked around the room, meeting the eyes or optical sensors of each alien representative. Because we are not going to fight them the way you did. We are not going to try to outmuscle them with bigger energy weapons or better shields. We are going to use their biological nature against them. How exactly? Demanded General Thrak. By hitting them fast and hard with weapons they cannot adapt to and payloads they cannot heal from, Morrison explained. The key is not to give them time to respond. One coordinated strike with kinetic penetrators followed immediately by biological agents. They will be too busy dealing with massive structural damage to adapt to the infection. Lieutenant Chen added more technical details to the holographic display. Our analysis shows that their regeneration systems require enormous computational resources. If we overwhelm those systems with multiple types of damage simultaneously, they will not be able to cope. And if you are wrong? Asked Kethvar quietly. If your plan fails, we will have lost our last hope. Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. Ambassador, I cannot promise you we will succeed, but I can promise you that we will try something different. Sometimes that is enough to change the outcome of a war. The meeting continued for several more hours as the humans explained their tactical approach in greater detail. Some alien representatives remained skeptical, while others began to show cautious optimism. The plan was certainly unconventional, but that might be exactly what was needed. As the conference ended, Morrison knew that within days they would discover whether humanity's first major contribution to galactic civilization would be salvation, or just another tragedy. The Vrak fleet was already moving toward their intercept point, and there would be no second chances. Walking back to his ship, Morrison felt the eyes of the entire galaxy watching him. Billions of lives depended on whether his theory about biological warfare would work against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable for 3 years. Soon they would all find out if sometimes the old ways really were the best ways after all. The Vrak Supremacy Lord Gosthai felt excitement coursing through his massive bioneural networks as his flagship Devourer approached the human fleet. His multiple eyes focused on the primitive vessels through his ship's organic sensors, and he could barely contain what might have been laughter in his species. After 3 years of crushing the greatest military powers in the galaxy, he was about to face 50 small metal ships that looked like they belonged in a museum. Report on enemy fleet composition, Gosthai commanded through his ship's living communication system. His tactical symbiont responded immediately with data flowing directly into his consciousness. 50 vessels total, Supremacy Lord. 20 small destroyers, 15 medium cruisers, 10 support ships, and 5 larger battleships. All constructed from primitive metal alloys. Weapon signatures indicate kinetic projectile systems rather than energy weapons. No advanced shielding detected. Gosthai's thorax expanded with predatory satisfaction. Kinetic weapons against adaptive bioarmor? These creatures are even more primitive than our intelligence suggested. How long since any galactic species tried such crude tactics? Over 2,000 standard years, Supremacy Lord. The last species to rely primarily on kinetic weapons was absorbed into our empire during the 3rd expansion cycle. The Vrak fleet moved through space with the fluid grace of living creatures. 12 massive dreadnoughts formed the center of their formation, while 36 smaller destroyer-class bioships spread out in hunting patterns. Each vessel pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that showed their eagerness for battle. Their organic hulls had already begun generating the adaptive shielding that had proven invulnerable to every weapon the galaxy had thrown at them. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Defender, Admiral Morrison stood calmly on his bridge watching the approaching enemy fleet. His crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency, preparing for what would either be humanity's greatest victory or its most spectacular failure. The tactical displays showed the Vrak ships closing distance exactly as predicted. Enemy fleet is deploying in standard attack formation, reported Lieutenant Chen from her position at the tactical station. Bioacid cannons are charging, and their regenerative protocols are showing full activity. Range to target? Morrison asked without taking his eyes off the main display. 200,000 kilometers in closing, sir. They are maintaining approach speed consistent with all previous battle records. Commander Collins studied his tactical board with concern. Sir, they are letting us get awfully close. Most engagements start at maximum weapons range. Morrison nodded slightly. They are confident, Steve. Why would they worry about primitive kinetic weapons when they have defeated energy weapons 1,000 times more powerful? In their minds, we are already beaten. The bridge crew could feel the tension building as the two fleets converged. Everyone knew that the next few minutes would determine the fate of galactic civilization. If the human strategy failed, there would be nothing left to stop the Vrak advance toward the core worlds. Sir, enemy fleet is now within optimal engagement range, Chen reported. All ships report weapon systems ready and ammunition loaded per your specifications. Morrison opened a communication channel to his entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Today we represent not just Earth but all the free peoples of this galaxy. The enemy expects us to fight like everyone else has fought them. They expect energy weapons they can absorb and conventional tactics they have seen 1,000 times before. Instead, we are going to show them what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and let us give these creatures a biology lesson they will never forget. The Vrak fleet continued its advance completely confident in their superiority. Lord Gasthai watched through his organic sensors as the human ships maintained their formation without firing. Most species would have opened fire at maximum range trying to score hits before the Vrak could close to optimal combat distance. These humans seemed content to let the bioships approach to point-blank range. Supremacy Lord, the enemy fleet has not fired, his tactical symbiont reported. Perhaps their weapon systems are malfunctioning. Or perhaps they are even more primitive than we thought, Gasthai replied. No matter. At this range, our bioacid cannons will dissolve their hulls in seconds. Prepare to fire. Aboard the Defender, Morrison watched the range counter tick down toward the number he had been waiting for. 50,000 kilometers. Close. Enough that his railguns could achieve maximum accuracy and velocity. Close enough that the Vrak would not have time to react before the first salvo hit home. All ships execute firing pattern Delta 7 on my mark, Morrison commanded. Target designation complete. Fire. What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations to come. The human fleet unleashed a coordinated barrage unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Instead of the energy weapons every species had used before them, they fired thousands of tungsten carbide penetrator rounds accelerated to 12% of light speed by magnetic rail systems. The effect was devastating beyond anything the Vrak had experienced. The kinetic projectiles struck their bioarmor with the force of nuclear weapons, creating massive holes that their regenerative systems had never been designed to handle. The adaptive shielding that had protected them from energy weapons was completely useless against solid matter, traveling at relativistic speeds. Second salvo fire, Morrison ordered calmly. Before the Vrak could even begin to react, the second wave of projectiles arrived. These were depleted uranium penetrators designed to punch through the holes created by the first salvo and detonate inside the bioships. The radioactive explosions disrupted the organic neural networks that controlled ship functions, causing system-wide failures throughout the enemy fleet. Third salvo fire. The final wave of ammunition was Morrison's secret weapon. Each projectile contained a payload of Earth-developed biological agents specifically designed to attack organic systems. Aggressive metal-eating bacteria that consumed structural materials, engineered viruses that targeted bioneural tissue, chemical compounds that interfered with cellular regeneration at the molecular level. The results exceeded even Morrison's most optimistic projections. Vrak dreadnoughts that had withstood years of energy weapon attacks began dissolving from the inside out, as Earth bacteria consumed their biometal superstructures. Ships that could regenerate from massive battle damage found themselves unable to cope with microscopic invaders specifically engineered to exploit biological vulnerabilities. Time elapsed since first salvo, Morrison asked his tactical officer. 37 seconds, sir, Chen replied in a voice filled with amazement. On the main display, the mighty Vrak fleet was in complete collapse. Dreadnoughts listed helplessly as their nervous systems failed. Bioships broke apart as bacteria ate through their structural supports. The massive flagship Devourer convulsed like a dying animal, its bioluminescent patterns flickering randomly as its organic brain tried desperately to cope with multiple system failures. "Sir, we are receiving transmissions from surviving Vrak vessels," Communications Officer Park announced. "They are requesting immediate ceasefire. Admiral, they are surrendering." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. In 37 seconds, a single human fleet had accomplished what 3 years of combined alien military might could not achieve. The seemingly invincible Vrak Empire had been brought to its knees by weapons they had never encountered and biological agents they had no defense against. Morrison looked around at his crew, seeing the mixture of relief and amazement on their faces. "Signal the survivors that we accept their surrender. Prepare medical teams to assist with evacuation of damaged vessels. And send a message to Kepler Station. Tell them the threat has been neutralized." The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than any starship could travel. Within hours of the battle, every major world knew that the Vrak Empire had been defeated in 37 seconds by a human fleet using primitive kinetic weapons and biological agents. The reaction was immediate and profound as entire civilizations struggled to understand how such a thing was possible. On Kepler Station, Ambassador Kethver stood in the main communications center, watching reports flood in from across galactic space. His blue skin flickered with patterns of amazement and confusion as he tried to process what had happened. Around him, representatives from dozens of species gathered to watch the tactical recordings that Admiral Morrison had transmitted back to the station. "Play it again," requested General Thrak of the Gornathi for the 5th time. His reptilian features showed complete bewilderment as he watched the Vrak dreadnoughts dissolve under the human attack. "How is this possible? Those bioships withstood everything we could throw at them." The holographic display showed the battle from multiple angles captured by sensors on both human and alien ships. The coordinated barrage of kinetic projectiles followed by the biological payload rounds created a devastation that no one had imagined possible. Vrak vessels that had seemed invincible just minutes before were reduced to floating debris, contaminated with Earth bacteria. Counselor Veltar coiled her serpentine body thoughtfully as she studied the sensor data. "The humans were correct about our approach being wrong. We were trying to fight biological creatures with energy weapons that actually made them stronger. It was like trying to put out a fire by pouring fuel on it. But kinetic weapons are so primitive," protested a delegate from the Crystalline Imperium. "We abandoned such crude technology thousands of years ago, when we developed plasma cannons and quantum disruptors. How could simple projectiles be more effective than our most advanced energy systems?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Amy Chen had been invited to address the assembled delegates, and she stood before them with the confidence of someone who had helped solve an impossible puzzle. The mistake everyone made was assuming that newer technology is always better technology. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one. She activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Vrak bioship. These creatures evolved to absorb and redirect energy. Every energy weapon you fired at them was converted into power for their regenerative systems. But they never developed defenses against kinetic impacts because most galactic species stopped using such weapons long ago. "It was a blind spot in their evolution," added Commander Steve Collins, who stood beside Chen. "Like a predator that has never encountered a particular type of prey. They simply had no natural defenses against what we threw at them." Admiral Morrison entered the chamber and the assembled delegates fell silent. The man who had accomplished what 3 years of galactic warfare could not achieve looked tired, but satisfied. He had spent the last several hours coordinating the surrender of surviving Vrak forces and arranging for medical assistance to be provided to the defeated enemy. "Admiral Morrison," Kethvar began, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to thank you for what you have accomplished today. You have saved billions of lives and preserved our civilization." Morrison nodded respectfully, but his expression remained serious. "Ambassador, the battle may be over, but our work is just beginning. We need to figure out what to do with the Vrak survivors and how to prevent something like this from happening again." "What do you mean?" asked Veltar. "The Vrak Empire controlled dozens of star systems and enslaved countless populations," Morrison explained. "Those territories need to be liberated and their people need help rebuilding their lives. The surviving Vrak need to be relocated somewhere they can live peacefully without threatening anyone else." General Thrak clicked his claws against his armor. Many of my people would prefer to see the Vrak completely destroyed after what they have done. They showed no mercy to their victims. Revenge is not justice, Morrison replied firmly. The Vrak were following their nature as they understood it. Now that they have been defeated, we have an opportunity to show them a better way to exist in this galaxy. Over the following days, human medical teams worked alongside alien specialists to help the surviving Vrak understand what had happened to them. The biological agents that had been used were designed to be temporary rather than permanent. With proper treatment, the affected bioships could recover, though they would never again pose the same threat they once had. Lord Gastai himself was among the survivors rescued from his flagship. The former Supremacy Lord was a broken creature, physically and mentally devastated by his defeat. When Morrison visited him in the medical bay, the alien looked up with eyes that held no fight left in them. "How?" Gastai asked through a translation device. "How did your primitive species accomplish what no one else could do?" Morrison sat down beside the alien's recovery pod. "Because we approached the problem differently. Your people adapted to fight energy weapons and conventional tactics, but Earth has spent millions of years dealing with biological threats. We know how living systems work and how to disrupt them. But your weapons were so crude," Gastai protested weakly. "Sometimes crude is exactly what you need," Morrison replied. "Your bioships were amazing achievements, but they had one fatal flaw. They were alive, and anything that is alive can be killed if you know how." The conversation marked the beginning of a new relationship between humanity and the former Vrak Empire. Under human supervision, the surviving Vrak were relocated to a suitable world where they could rebuild their society along more peaceful lines. Human advisors worked with them to develop new ways of thinking about their place in the galaxy. Meanwhile, the impact of humanity's victory spread throughout galactic civilization. Military academies began teaching courses on asymmetric warfare and biological combat systems. The concepts of thinking outside conventional parameters and approaching problems from unexpected angles became central to military doctrine across dozens of species. Ambassador Kethvar officially welcomed Earth as a full member of the Galactic Council, with all the rights and privileges that came with that status. Human technology and tactical expertise were suddenly in high demand as species that had dismissed humanity as primitive now recognized the value of different perspectives. Admiral Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but he carried with him a new understanding of humanity's role in the galaxy. They were no longer just another young species struggling to find their place among the stars. They had become teachers and protectors, showing others that there were always alternative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. In his final report, Morrison wrote that the Battle of Kepler system had lasted only 37 seconds, but its implications would reshape galactic civilization for centuries to come. Humanity had proven that sometimes the most devastating weapon was not the biggest or most advanced, but the one your enemy never expected to face. The Vrak Empire was gone, but in its place rose something better. A galaxy where different approaches to problems were valued, and where the newest members could teach the oldest that there was always more than one way to solve any challenge that arose among the stars.